It's time to show you some ways to approach the planning of your strategies. Many players who've played Prismata for a long time only rely on their intuition they've built up when making plans for a set, sometimes not even thinking about the next turn in detail. Even I do this sometimes if I'm rusty or I'm feeling lazy, but it's a bad habit to have if you're serious about being competitive. Here's a rather simple set where the key unit is Lance-Tooth, because it denies absorb and is simply the most efficient unit to buy early in the match. There's a few different ways to go about setting it up, with Bloodphage, Tantalum Ray, or even Doom-Mech with Steelforge. All of these options work well, but as P1, I chose to go for Doom-Mech because P2 gets the better Tantalum and Phage openings. There's not much opportunity for your opponent to interrupt your plans in this set, because I can assume that both of us will be buying Lance-Teeth, so having the best possible plan and executing it flawlessly is the key to victory. Since we have Doom-Mech Absorb and Soak, I think we should be shooting for at least 16 drones by the mid-game. Now it's time to think about exactly which order you'll buy your units in. There's no chance of turn 1 attack being correct, so let's skip to turn 2. From here we can project how the next 4 turns will play out in our minds, by counting how many resources will be available on each turn. Lance-Tooth speeds up matches by making early attack better, so neither of us will be buying a third NG. So the natural way for me to get Doom-Mech without cutting too much econ is with a turn 3 Blastforge. I have 12 gold on turn 3 and can buy 2 drones and a Blastforge, which puts me on 12 drones and floating 1 gold. So on turn 4 I'll have 13 gold and a blue. If he went for Phage, then I'll buy a wall, otherwise I'll be buying Splitter. If I buy the Splitter, I'll have 7 gold left to buy drone and Steelforge. So on turn 5 I'll have 13 gold and 2 blue, which I'll spend on Doom-Mech and a drone. Then on turn 6 I'll be buying Lance-Tooth and probably a Pixie with the second blue, and plan further from that point depending on the state of the board. All of this planning can be done on turn 2 to ensure that your strategy doesn't hit a roadblock, or have some serious flaw that will force it to go in an unintended direction. I did my planning on turn 2, and the openings played out exactly how I was expecting. Here's what it looked like. Now in a set like this, I can show you a good way to do thorough planning when you have to play more reactively because your opponent has more than a couple of good openings. Firstly, it's important to think about what the good openings for your opponent are. Then establish a main plan like we did in the last set. Try to make it the most efficient opening you can do if your opponent plays the set the way that you expect, and doesn't go out of their way to attempt to interrupt you. Then, as you're playing the first few turns, establish contingency plans by observing their options every turn. For example, on turn 2 my opponent has to consider what to do if I choose to do a strategy named the Evil Animus, which is when player 1 buys an Animus on turn 3, in a set where Thorium Dynamo is the best drone. For P2, the most efficient way to build your econ is by buying 2 Dynamos on turn 2. Which leaves you with not enough gold to buy a Blastforge to defend on the next turn, so the Evil Animus can be very annoying to deal with. In this case, the Evil Animus was actually my main plan, because I wanted to buy 2 perfs to kill his NGs, and then buy a Lance-Tooth the turn after. If I were him, I think my contingency plan against this would be to skip Lance-Tooth and go mostly breach-proof. He can do that by getting 3 dynamos and maybe a few drones to convert into a Venge Cannon, and then Gauss Cannons and charges afterward. This strategy normally wouldn't be very good, but the presence of Nevo Charge often significantly favors more breach-proof strategies, especially against a low econ strat. If the breach-proof player does their calculations right, the Nevos would be bought on the turn that allows them to breach through to the low HP attackers.